Hi everybody, this is Ken Leone and I'll be presenting today's webinar, 5 Steps to Monitoring Your VMware Infrastructure, and I also have Susan Builder online with me as well, and she's going to help moderate. A quick note on our agenda: we're going to start with a quick slide deck, and then we're going to jump into Longitude as quickly as possible, and then we're going to open it up for questions and answers. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to enter them in the webinar in the question panel. All right, so let's get to it. So let's talk a bit about the challenge, right? So our VMware environments are certainly volatile, to say the least. So the trick is, how do you ensure that all your moving parts are functioning properly? How do you properly baseline your current usage? Because if you can't see where you are, you can't see really where you're going to be going. The VMware infrastructures are starting to change, especially their makeup. A lot of folks used to run strictly in a private IT infrastructure, private cloud. Now folks are running in a hybrid environment, and that makes it even more challenging in terms of how do you properly plan and configure and predict, if you will, for CPU, memory, and storage related issues. It's a particularly vexing problem, if you will. Okay, so how can Longitude help? So Longitude comes with a built-in knowledge base, and it deploys with a simple point and click. It understands what key metrics need to be watched. It'll automatically evaluate what's going on and alert you to the problems via dashboard. There's also email, there's paging, and all kinds of other capabilities as well. Now, Longitude also archives VMware metrics, and it generates clear and concise reports, and we're going to show you some of that today. Those same metrics are also available for use in Longitude's Capacity Planner. And the Capacity Planner has a what-if capability. And as the name what if implies, it's what if. What if I were to add more VMs? What would that look like? When would I reach capacity? These are some examples. What if I were to move VMs between hosts? Again, what would that look like? What would it happen if I were to add or remove host capacity? How would that affect performance? Lastly, Longitude helps by keeping the resources required to administer and monitor your VMware infrastructure to a minimum. It's really just a few easy steps. So we're going to quickly go through the steps, and then I'm going to show you with a live instance of Longitude. So step one is you're going to configure Longitude to monitor your VMware infrastructure. And it's as simple as a point and click. You're going to tell Longitude where your vCenter console is, and you're going to give it credentials, and then Longitude will take it from there. Step two is you're going to leverage Longitude's built-in knowledge base. It knows what vSphere metrics to collect, how often to collect them, and more importantly, how to evaluate them. And here's a quick screenshot here. On the left pane shows the currently active knowledge base. Okay, so we're monitoring VMware, we're looking at host metrics, we're looking at VM metrics, we're looking at data stores, resource pools, clusters, et cetera, all out of the box. It's what I would call an atomic process. On the right pane is, in this instance, we're showing you the current knowledge base, where we're targeting a disk I/O rate, and under those circumstances we would generate an alert. And we can also, in addition to setting thresholds, we can configure Longitude's behavior as well, for example, alerting you via email or paging or whatever. Step three is you're going to utilize Longitude's built-in reporting. All the metrics that Longitude collects, as well as any resulting alerts, they're all archived in Longitude. And Longitude's built-in reporting makes it real easy to generate reports on performance and on availability as well. And here we see a sample report. We're looking at disk I/O per disk per VM. So we'll be generating some of these in a short while here, but these reports are very quick and easy to generate, and they provide information in a clean and concise format. Now, this is an example of a report that's related to alerts. So what we see here are alerts that are coming from both Longitude and vCenter. So Longitude is showing us what alerts were generated and when. Step 4 is really properly planning for changes in your VMware infrastructure. Ultimately, it's a what-if challenge. Again, what if I added VMs? What if I moved VMs? What if I changed the footprint of my hosts, increased resources, decreased sources? What's that going to look like? And Longitude's Capacity Planner allows you to do just that. You can play out different scenarios. And what we have here is a scenario where we took a workload called App Server, and we added 10 more instances of that workload onto this host, and we can see that we've exceeded. We're looking at memory, and our host has well, basically 60 gig of memory, and we can see this just isn't going to work. We've exceeded the 60 gig available, so this workload just won't work in this instance. We're either going to have to add more resources to the host, or add another host and move the VMs to that host. The last step is you've heeded Longitude's warnings. Maybe you've made some adjustments or made some changes, and now what you want to do is see how those changes have affected ongoing performance. Now, one of the nice capabilities that Longitude provides is the ability for you to automatically create reports, automatic report generation. Those reports can be scheduled, they can be emailed, they can be published in the Longitude portal, and they can also be published into the likes of things like SharePoint, for example. Okay, so that's my slide deck. I want to jump right into Longitude at the moment here, so let me escape out of here. Give you a little look here. So when we talked earlier, we talked about step 1 being, okay, the first thing you want to do is configure Longitude to monitor your VMware infrastructure. What's that going to look like? Well, I've logged in as a fully privileged user into Longitude. Longitude has role-based behavior, but I want to be able to do everything today, and I'm on the monitoring tab, and I'm just going to click on monitor. And what I have here is a list of all the things that Longitude is capable of monitoring. Our main interest is VMware, so I've selected VMware. If I'm not sure what all this means, Longitude has really good context help here. It's very quick, very clean, very neat. And all I need to do is tell Longitude the vCenter console or consoles to connect to. So I've already got one in my list here, so I'm just going to click on vCenter here and pick my test host, or vCenter rather, my test vCenter console, and I give it credentials. So I'll give it some credentials here and some other information, and I click on monitor, and I'm off to the races. Now, I've already done that. As a matter of fact, if I expand on vCenter here, .test.net, these are the different categories of metrics that this instance of Longitude is monitoring. So like I said earlier, it's an atomic process. Once you connect it to your vCenter, that's it, you're done. What Longitude does is it knows what information to collect and how often to collect it. So if I take a quick look here at VM CPU, we can see here that Longitude in this instance, it's identified a virtual machine called Kosovo, and it's CPU usage and a few other metrics. So these metrics, these classes of metrics are being written into a back-end database, in this instance every 15 minutes, and by virtue of that data hitting the database, Longitude says, hey, I've got VMware data here, I need to evaluate it, and I need to tell you if you have any problems. Again, it's as simple as pointing and clicking and telling it to monitor your VMware infrastructure. Okay, so that's pretty boring, pretty easy, very quick to do. The next step really is to leverage the built-in knowledge base that identifies the problems. So what I will do is I'll segue over to our dashboard, okay? And what I've done here is I've told Longitude in the display here to tell me what's going on using the built-in knowledge base. And what we can see here, for example, is that Longitude's identified a couple things here. We can see here that we have a CPU usage is high on a virtual machine called Denmark. The virtual machine has changed from green to yellow, and this is coming from actually vCenter, but above it you'll see the Longitude alert, which gives us a little bit more detail. We can see we're actually at 92% on that VM. So the built-in knowledge base is out there, and it's doing a couple of things. It's collecting the data so that we can generate reports on it for performance and capacity planning, but it's also evaluating this stuff, telling us if we have a problem, and in this instance, it's putting it up on a display. Okay. Now, there are a number of ways to see exactly what's going on, and in this instance, we're looking at the the event display. What I can also do is look at something called a status dashboard. So these are configurable, and you can build your own. And what we can see here, that, for example, very quickly, is that this instance of Longitude is monitoring a total of 24 VMs, and I have one of them, Denmark, which is having problems. And actually, I can either click on all, and I can see exactly what's happening on all of them, and I can see what the current usage is. Or I could say, okay, just show me the one that's problematic. The Longitude will show me the one that's problematic. So this dashboard can be up on a monitor or on the wall somewhere, and they'll constantly refresh. This is, I call it near real time. So this is one way to see what's going on. Okay, we can go back to our events here. This is another way to see what's going on. Okay, and then there's what's called an SLA engine in Longitude. And this is really, really cool stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click over to SLA for a moment here. And you can build your own SLAs. It's all point and click. In the interest of time, we won't cover the details as to how to do it, but it's pretty straightforward. And what I did is I created a simple SLA where what I told Longitude to do is I wanted it to monitor the memory, disk, and CPU of my VMs for my test lab. And what I've done here is I've said, listen, if the CPU usage exceeds 70% on a given VM, that's a degraded problem. And if it exceeds 90% on a given VM, that's an unacceptable problem. And what we can see visually up here is we can see that I haven't had any problems today related to memory or disk. Now I'm running this in a lab environment, so I've got some code that's generating some load, and I can see here that I had some problems with my CPU earlier in the day, cleared up for a little while, came back, cleared up for a little while, and it's back again. So I can see for the day today, I've only been in compliance 23% of the time. And I can see under what hours of the day that I was out of compliance. Now what's interesting now is I want to get a little bit more detail. So what I can do is I can drill. Okay, so this SLA is monitoring 10 of the 20 VMs, and I can see very quickly and easily where I had my problems. Okay, so for example, I can see node Italy is currently fine because it's green, but it had a problem earlier today. What's the deal with that? So I can see it was unacceptable at midnight, and then it became degraded, and then it became good again. So what do you mean it was degraded? Well, it exceeded 70%. It was unacceptable because it exceeded 90%, but now I want to get a little bit more information so I can actually graph that metric. And then I can see it was really high, right? And then it settled down again. Now we're looking at Denmark, and Denmark is currently, because it's not green, it's in a bad state. Why is it in a bad state? It went from good to degraded at 12:30 to unacceptable at 12:35. So now what I can do is I can graph that and get a bit more detail, and I can see exactly what's going on. So if you have a large number of VMs or a sizable virtual environment, SLAs are a good mechanism that allows you to quickly and easily identify where you have resource problems without, again, in a way that is quick, clean, and concise. And these SLAs can also be generated as reports as well. And this is a display. It's another real-time display, or I'll call it a near real-time display. You can have this up on the wall. If there are any problems and things change color, then you know you have a problem. Now, you may not be necessarily looking at our display, so one of the nice capabilities that Longitude provides is the ability to alert you that you have a problem. So I'm going to go back to my dashboard for a moment here, and here we have a problem with Denmark again, and we can see here we're at 92%. Now, the knowledge base said, hey, I got a problem, I generated an event, and as a Longitude user and as an administrator of the technology, I talked in the PowerPoint slide deck about how easy it is to administer it, and we want to minimize the amount of time you are required to administer Longitude. What I can do is I can simply click on Configure here, and I can do a couple things. So I'm in the knowledge base. So this instance of Longitude's monitoring a number of technologies, but by clicking on the Configure button while I had the event selected, Longitude identified the specific knowledge component that caused that event to be generated. So we were looking at VMware, we had a problem with a VM CPU. On the right pane, we can see that any VM that exceeds 80% is going to cause an event to be generated. I have the ability to override the knowledge base. So for whatever reasons, if I want to set it back to 75, I can set it back to 75. I can also have different thresholds for different VMs or groups of VMs. So I could say, okay, for Node Ireland, I prefer a threshold of 85%. So I have the ability to control the behavior of the Longitude knowledge base. Now, as I indicated earlier, you may not be looking at the display all the time. We all have day jobs, so to speak. So I can configure Longitude to notify me of a problem related to a VMware resource or a VMware alert. So I go to Actions. So what I have done here is I've said, hey, Longitude, if the CPU busy is happening for an extended period of time, so 4 times in a row, what I want the technology to do is to email me. You have other capabilities as well. For example, you can configure Longitude to text your phone. So I just put here, I want to text, find my phone provider, whatever that phone provider happens to be, put my phone number in, and Longitude will reach out to me and page me. If I want to communicate with another technology with an SNMP trap, I can generate traps. Maybe I want to run a script, so I can have Longitude run a script as well. I can control the times of the day or the days of the week that Longitude alerts me. I also have a cool-off capability as well. So what I've done here is I said, hey, Longitude, when there's a problem, alert me, and then leave me alone for a couple hours. I don't want to deal with it right now. I can add other actions as well. For example, I could do a specific action for a specific virtual machine. So here I have an action that says, if it's for a virtual machine called Andorra, and the problem happens 3 times in a row, I'd like Longitude to SMS a phone and then cool off for an hour. So a lot of power and a lot of capability in terms of both notification and corrective actions are built into Longitude. It's quick, like I said, it's clean, it's neat. It's not something that takes a Herculean amount of work to get up and running. Okay, so we've got our knowledge base in play here. I'm going to go back to events really quickly, and I'm just going to look at a Windows set of metrics here, just to give you an idea of the kinds of things that Longitude can do. So here we have a load being generated by a test program. So what's important to understand also is that if you do have a resource problem, what Longitude's going to do is, if it's a Windows machine, it's going to identify the Windows process. If it's a Linux, Unix machine, it'll also identify the daemon that's consuming the resources. So if you have a resource depletion problem, Longitude will identify who's consuming those resources and alert you to those problems as well. Okay, so I talked about configuring Longitude, leveraging the knowledge base, reporting on performance. Let's start with that now. So let's go to reports, and actually let's start with the alerts. So we just saw those alerts. So what I can say is, hey Longitude, what I'd like you to do is report on any problems that you found. Application events are problems that Longitude has found, and I can go back a period of time. All the data that Longitude it's all archived in a back-end database, so all the alerts and all the performance data end up in there. And I could do it for all servers. I could do it for specific servers. So I just want to do vcenter.test.net because that's my vCenter console. So this is a graphical representation of all the problems that I've been having and when. Now, and this is just a full disclosure. It's a test lab, so we've been trying out different things. So it's a problem that won't go away. I want a little bit more information. So it's, gosh, you got these critical problems. What's going on? So I can click on critical here. And what you can see here, again, is I've been doing tests, and you can see that I've had high CPU usage problems. These are, again, for a VM called Italy. There's Denmark again, where Longitude is complaining about Denmark. And actually, if I expand it here, I can see it's a persistent problem that won't go away because everything is date and time stamped. So if I need to get some historical context as to what happened and when, I can do it a couple ways. I can actually look at the alerts that Longitude has generated or that vCenter has generated. Or I can also look at the actual raw performance data as well. So for that, I'm going to switch from application events, and you'll notice in Longitude there's what's called standard reporting. which is straight performance reporting, and there's also capacity planning. So let's start with the standard reporting for a moment. And I have multiple vCenter consoles here, so I could start at the enterprise and report across all my vCenter consoles. So these are all my VMs, okay? Or maybe I just want to look at vCenter.test.dat. So let's see what's happening on that guy. Here I put it up so that you see the detail of each of the VMs. So this is the CPU footprint of each of the VMs on this host over a period of time. Now let's get a summary report, take a different way to look at it. And what we can see here is it's a report of my top 10 on this host based on VM CPU usage. It's a very flexible reporting engine, but it's clean and concise. If I want to slice it and dice it, I can actually click here and I can see actually what's happening on Denmark. So this is my CPU footprint on Denmark. Okay. If I want to slice it and dice it even further, I can even say I'd like a table. So I can look at the actual raw data. I have the ability to export that table as a CSV file if I want to send that data somewhere else. Or I could go back to a graph. I'm reporting on multiple days. They're all pretty consistent in terms of CPU usage, but if I wanted to see if there was like some sort of bell curve or something like that, this is my average per hour. Similar to before, if I'd like to switch it off to a table, I can switch it off as a table, or I can go back to a graph like this. I'm going to go back to the vCenter here, and then I can just go right across the top here. So what's my CPU ready? Maybe I care about memory footprint on my VMs. I'm a host person. I want to know how this host is handling the workload. I can go to the host. So there's my CPU usage. And then I can drill to get more detail. Again, very clean, very neat, quick. Again, it's not something that takes Herculean effort to administer. So we have standard performance reports. But we also have a capacity planner. So let's show you the capacity planner here. Okay, so the capacity planner has a different way of visualizing what's going on here. So I have a test lab. I've got a bunch of VMs, handful if you will, sitting on a test host. And what I did is I said, hey, from a capacity planning standpoint, can you kind of show me what's going on from a CPU perspective? So my CPU capacity is roughly 18 gig, and you can see here I'm up to 14 gig, and these are the various VMs. So this is Italy, a VM called Denmark, and a VM called Croatia. What's happening from a CPU perspective? Okay, and here we're looking at memory, and you can see here I got all kinds of memory, right? This is my consumed, so this would be all the memory that the VMs would use if they used everything I told them that they could use. Okay, and this is the total capacity on the host. If we look at processor, this will make a little bit of sense. Remember, we saw all the testing before. We can see what processors were busy on the host as well. But let's go back to CPU here on the host. Okay, so I'm looking at this, and this is all well and good. What I can do is I can create scenarios. So I'm going to add a scenario here, and let's collapse this for a moment here. And I'm going to take this scenario, I'm going to rename it, and we're going to add some VMs. Now, when I run the report here, you can see this scenario looks the same as what we had above, right? Other hosts, looks exactly the same. It's a twin, if you will. So let's collapse a few things here. And you can see here I get information regarding the memory and all kinds of other wonderful demographic information. And let's pick Denmark. So let's say I wanted to add more VMs with a footprint similar to Denmark. So I can take Denmark and I can add, I'll clone it, and I'll say I want one more copy on this host and see what that looks like. Okay, when I've done that, I still have room. Maybe I want to add another. Well, let's add two more. Let's do that. So I want to add two more instances of a VM call Denmark and see what's going to happen. And I kind of know what's going to happen. And I can see, oh, wait a minute, when I do that, my capacity is 18 gig, but I'm using over 20 gig. So this would be an instance of using this methodology in order to justify additional host resources or additional capacity rather than providing somebody with just, well, I think I need some more. This provides you a visual representation based on the actual workload. So this isn't a good thing. So what I can also do is I can change the property on the host and I can double up on the CPU and see what happens. And I've doubled up, okay, so this is what it would look like if I doubled up on the CPU. Well, maybe I don't want to double up on the CPU. So let's take this this scenario and clone it, and we're going to call it add a host. It's a very powerful capability. So now if I click on add a host, it's a clone of what we just did. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set the CPU back down. And now what I'm going to do is instead is I'm going to clone my host. And I'm not going to bring over the VMs. So now I have a new host. And then what I could do is I could just simply say, well, which is that one? No, Italy. I can just take Italy, drag them over here, and see what that looks like. So now I can see I've got all kinds of resources available to me now on this host. And if I click on this host, life is good. So I promised to try to keep it to a half an hour. I'm going to show you one last thing. In the reporting capability of Longitude, when you generate reports, what you can do, it doesn't really matter what report here is. I'll just pick this report here. You have the ability to schedule a report. And I can have that report run on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. I can have reports emailed to me. I can have them exported as XHTML for, again, consumption to the likes of SharePoint. When you batch those reports, they also show up in the Longitude portal. So again, if you have a role-based security, give people access to the reports. And if I want to look at a specific report for a specific day, so example, what happened on September the 28th, I can see what my usage was on September the 28th. Okay, so again, I wanted to try to keep this to the half hour, and I want to see if we have any questions. So let me go to the question panel here. Here's a few here. Let's see. How does Longitude handle multiple data centers? You have the ability to deploy what are called remote agents or statistics servers. It's a piece of code that can sit at a remote location, and what it'll do is it'll collect data on behalf of the Longitude console. Let me see here. What else do we have? Let me do something else here. Oh, Susan, you've got some questions here. Hold on. Let me get you here. Make you an organizer. So maybe I can see the questions, the additional questions, Susan. Okay. Is there an escalation policy built into Longitude? What happens if a problem continues? What you can do is you can escalate it based on how often a problem persists. So as the problem continues to occur, you can take different actions based on how many times that given problem has occurred. So 1 time do one thing, 2 times do something else, 3 times do something else. Let's see. Can I run Longitude on a Unix server? No, it runs only on Windows for that. When Longitude detects a problem, does it initiate or change the virtual infrastructure in any way? No, the default is, well, it'll notify you by default, but you have to run scripts in Longitude in response to a problem. So if you've got PowerShell or something like that, it'll respond to it that way. How does Longitude get data? Does it need vSphere with operations management? No, it's getting it natively. So it's connecting right to the vCenter, and it's grabbing the data natively in the in the vSphere environment. Susan, I don't see your questions. I see the ones that were sent to me. Do you want to message them to me? Or I can hit the people afterwards.
I can message them over to you.
Okay, cool. Why don't you send them over and then we'll answer those questions.
Hang on a second. Actually,
Yeah.
I'm not seeing them.
Oh, they're gone, huh?
I guess so.
All right. Well, they'll come back. Let me put my contact information up on the screen. And if you have additional questions, actually, just email to ken.leone@heroix.com, and we'll do the best we can to get back to you. Okay, we tried to keep it to a half an hour, pretty darn close. Thank you all for your time, and again, feel free to visit us at www.heroix.com or email me at ken.leone@heroix.com. Again, thank you and have a great day, everybody.